Welcome to the Daily Insider on this lovely Wednesday afternoon after a crazy Tuesday afternoon of NFL news. I am Tommy Freeze Pops. You know me from the Great Dane Nation podcast, among other Vegas Insider things. You see me here on Fridays on the Daily Insider. You saw me sit at a Denny's for 24 straight hours last summer, and I am here filling in for Kevin Rodgers, who feeling under the weather today. He'll be back tomorrow, but you got me today, and you got two great guests coming up on the Daily Insider. We got Brandon Krisztal, my old DraftKings buddy, joining us from Denver. He's going to lead off the show here to talk about Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, if you really think about it. He got traded from the Seahawks yesterday. Seahawks fans not happy about that one. Broncos fans very happy about that one. Finally getting a true replacement for Peyton Manning like a decade later. So going to talk to BK out of Denver about that historic trade that happened yesterday in the NFL. We'll also talk about Aaron Rodgers, a few other things. Then we're going to be joined with George Sedano, who's in Miami for tonight's one seed versus one seed matchup, Suns Heat. He's based out of LA, so he'll talk Lakers. He'll preview the big game tonight in Miami. We'll talk some NBA, maybe mix in some other LA topics. But great show planned for you today here on the Daily Insider. But before we get into all of the great guests today, I wanted to tell you about our good friends from the Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. To all of our great listeners in Colorado, check out the Sports Illustrated Sportsbook right now for a great new deal. Get up to $300 in free bets. Make a bet of $10 or more and receive a free $10 bet up to 30 times. New players only, 21 plus to play. Located in Colorado only. Promo code ROAD300. That's ROAD 300. And with that, a qualifying bet is $10 or more, a minimum odds of minus 150, free bet tokens credited after bet is settled and expire after 7 days. You're going to get a free bet stakes not included in the winnings. And for more information, you're going to want to head to sportsillustratedsportsbook.com. That's sisportsbook.com. All right, let's go to our friend in Denver. My friend, my good friend. I got his Christmas card like on my fridge still right now. Brandon Krisztal. Brandon, BK, what's going on? I love the background setup you got here, dude. Is this new?
Whoops. Yeah, relatively new.
The background's nice. The mic falls down, but the background
falls down just because I hit it. No, relatively new. Yeah, just a few weeks old. Built out a studio here in the basement with the background. The background kind of a work in progress. My wife said she doesn't like the starting lineups here in the same shot as the picture of she and I and our now 15-year-old at our wedding 8 years ago yesterday. But this Broncos helmet too, I just got. It's autographed by Floyd Little, but the idea is that soon enough it'll be signed by all the Broncos Hall of Famers. So that's the plan. We'll see. I like your background. I'm curious. So you have a Patriots mini helmet. As you can see, I have one. I'm trying just like a weatherman. Does yours have an autograph?
No, that's just a plain old regular sized helmet. Actually, doesn't fit my head.
That's regular size. Oh, I guess the depth. I didn't realize. Oh, regular size. So that's cool. So I don't know if you can. I'm sure you can't read the signature, but it's signed by a certain quarterback, not named Mac Jones, but the guy that actually was the quarterback 2 years prior for a bunch of years.
We'll have to get back to who that quarterback might have been. But you guys have a good quarterback now in Denver, a guy that you're probably going to want to autograph that Broncos helmet behind you at some point. Russell Wilson, I would say, is probably going to be a Hall of Famer when his career is all said and done. He is now going to be wearing that orange Denver Broncos uniform. How did that come to be? And how are Broncos fans feeling right now? They must be over the moon excited to finally have their guy to go around that complete roster that you guys have on both sides of the ball. I mean, that's that's a scary team now in Denver.
Yeah, it was a good roster to begin with, and when you and I would talk, I would point that out. It was more a question of, can they get over any kind of hump with a combination of Drew Lock and anyone else? It turned out to be Teddy Bridgewater last year, and they just weren't able to. They did stay in playoff contention all the way up until the last week of the season, and I'm not sure how many people remember, but on that Sunday of game 16, week 17, so still with one more week left to play, they're in LA and they need a bunch of stuff to happen. I don't have those scenarios in front of me, but it was like they need the Browns or the Bengals, to both of them to win, somebody else to lose, this and that, and everything that needed to happen, the Colts to lose, whatever it was, all the stuff they needed to happen happened. Now they lost to the Chargers, so they were done. Then they played the Chiefs tough the final week, but the game didn't really count. Otherwise, they would have been playing the Chiefs for a playoff shot. That was with Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. So now you bring in a guy like you said. I've thought for years that Russ would be a Hall of Famer, and you look at the 9 Pro Bowls, you look at the 65% completion percentage, you look at the passing yards, you look at the touchdown to interception ratio. He's closing on 300 touchdowns. He doesn't even have 100 INTs yet in his career. He's going to be there. He's been the reason that the Seahawks have been relevant for a long time as the Legion of Boom has dissipated, dissolved, and the players around him have changed. He's kept the Seahawks relevant. He wasn't enough last year to get them in the playoffs. I thought all the teams in that division were going to be playoff bound. Turns out the Seahawks just didn't have enough. But you're right about Broncos country. They are over the moon is probably an understatement. And I'd love to see it at Fanatics or NFL Shop, what the custom number 3 Wilson jerseys, because Nike won't put those out probably for another month, 6 weeks. They have to wait till next week for the deal to even be official. But I'm sure the sales on that had to be probably right where Bucks jerseys were, actually probably more, just because there's more Broncos fans than Bucks fans. But when Tom Brady chose to go to Tampa, I'm not trying to pour salt in the wounds, but that happened. That had to be a record. This has to be, and we know that there aren't Rams fans. I saw that at the Super Bowl. There just aren't that many yet. So the Stafford thing, it just didn't happen. Anyway, I think that you'll see plenty of number 3 orange Wilson jerseys here really going forward. And I don't know if you noticed too, right as I came on to join you, Russell Wilson sent out a tweet to Seattle. It says, Seattle in all caps, comma, I love you, space, forever grateful, number 3. Or hashtag 3, but I'm assuming he meant number 3.
Yeah, couldn't shout out the 12s though there? Come on.
I guess
just shout himself out there. Selfish.
And the whole city, Seattle, in caps, but not the 12 specifically.
Well, the Broncos are now I'm looking at the SI Sportsbook now. It looks like 1,200 to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, unanimous across multiple sports books. 1,200 seems like that number, which has them 5th. Do you call them 5th best odds or 5th worst odds? Because technically, if you place the bet, it's the 5th worst odds, but it means that you're the 5th favorite, if you will.
I'd say 5th best is what I'd say.
It's easier to say and easier than trying to explain the way odds work to a layman. Everyone else that's going to lay the money down, and certainly everybody listening to your show is going to lay some money down. You got to think at some point they understand when you say 5th best odds. Really,
exactly. Yeah. I think we're all operating at the same level here when it comes to that. So, like we talked about, Broncos plus 1,200. You cover the team on a day-to-day basis. That might be the odds, but is it realistic to think that they can make that leap right now with Russell at quarterback? Because look, you said the Seahawks have been carried by Russell Wilson the last few years. People have been talking about the Seahawks draft history over the last, whatever it's been, 6-7 years. They've drafted like 2 Pro Bowlers in that time span or something crazy for a team that's been as successful as they have been to not have the individual talent that you would think they'd have outside of Wilson and really DK Metcalf. And obviously Bobby Wagner getting released yesterday. But, you add Russell Wilson into a team in Denver that was in the playoff mix, but they missed the playoffs this past year. They haven't been a real Super Bowl threat in years at this point. Can they do it? Is it a team? Should we be actually trying to, cash in on some of this value here at plus 1,200 at the moment?
Well, recent history is on their side. Now they're not hosting the Super Bowl this year, and until they get a new stadium or a canopy over the current one, and with a new owner, maybe that's possible, especially with someone that comes in or an ownership group with really deep pockets that wants to to build a new stadium. But that notwithstanding, the recent history of teams with new veteran quarterbacks winning a Super Bowl is on Russell Wilson's side, right? We saw Matt Stafford do it with a good team in LA. He got them over the hump. And the year before, Tom Brady with a good team in Tampa got them over the hump. It was a quarterback that was holding him back. And you look at the Broncos on both sides of the ball. This certainly isn't the best defense that he's played on. The Legion of Boom has to be there for now until the Broncos win a Super Bowl with this current cast of characters. But Pat Surtain looks like a perennial Pro Bowl type. Probably should have made it last year. Justin Simmons didn't make Pro Bowl for some reason, but was second team All-Pro for the second time in the last 3 years. They get Bradley Chubb rounding into form and now a contract year playing for a new deal. And if he can stay healthy, maybe he gets that. Do they add some sort of pass rush help? Von Miller tweeted that he wants to be back in Denver, and that was the day before Russ got here. So can they work out a deal to bring number 58 back? And he's still living here, and his little boy lives here with his mom. And Vaughn obviously wants to see him more. So that's a possibility. Other veterans, could they mix those guys in? They like Draymond Jones up front. They like Baron Browning on defense. They're going to maybe bring Josie Jewell back. So they have some nice pieces on that side of the ball. And Ejiro Evero, the new defensive coordinator, worked with Monty Kiffin, Vic Fangio, Wade Phillips, Dom Capers, who's on this staff, and then Raheem Morris, of course. So he's been around some really, really good defensive coaches. And he's going to do what they were doing last year, where they were the number 3 scoring defense and have been really good the last couple of years under Vic Fangio, despite having no offense to speak of consistently, not points-wise. Then on offense, you get Cortland Sutton rounding back into Pro Bowl form, Tim Patrick, Mr. Reliable. Both those guys have new deals. Can Jerry Jeudy get to where people expect him to perform at? KJ Hamler coming off the ACL is by all accounts ahead of schedule. And so you get that element of speed. Yes, you lose Noah Fant, but you still have Albert O. Okuebinom's super fast, right? He's right there with Noah Fant as the second and third fastest tight ends in the league behind Darren Waller. And then, of course, everyone else's probably favorite fantasy back heading into the year, certainly a guy in a short list of favorite backs, depending on who they pair with them, Javonte Williams. So the players I just ran down for in a solid O-line, not a great O-line, and they need a right tackle, but Garrett Bowles has played well in recent years, played certainly a lot better 2 years ago when he was an All-Pro, second team All-Pro. Last year, maybe took a step back. Some of that has to do with who's under center, who's calling plays. With Russell Wilson out there, he's maybe going to have a few less holding calls anyway. So, yeah, I do think it's realistic to not only have them as a playoff favorite, but right now at 12-1, the odds may not get any better, if you will, if you're a bettor. And so when I get off with you, I may hop on SI Sportsbook and lay down $100 just to have a shot at it, because if they sign any of the big time free agents that are out there, and they still have salary cap room, but if they sign Von Miller or sign another big name free agent, those odds may just go down, and then they're 10-1 or 8-1. And then when you get into the season, who knows? I guess they could go the other way if there's significant injury, but right now we don't have that. So at 12-1, yeah, I'm probably gonna go lay some cash down.
You got to love the convenient timing of Von Miller saying he's open to a return to Denver. And then the next day, Russell Wilson magically is traded to the Broncos. I wonder if he maybe heard something. But that's a different conversation for a different day. Speaking of speculation, how close was an Aaron Rodgers deal to happening in Denver?
I think on the Broncos side, it was as close as they wanted it to be, in that they had the framework of a deal in place. And obviously Nathaniel Hackett coming in after having spent the last 3 years with Aaron Rodgers. And whenever you hear Aaron talk about Nathaniel Hackett, even dating back to last year, and saying he would hate to lose him, but just how much he loves him and how he's his favorite guy in the building. And when you spend some time around Hackett, and I was able to a couple different times in Indianapolis, and actually was on the same flight home from him, so talked to him at baggage claim as well when we got back from the combine Saturday night. He has an infectious personality. And so it made sense that going in for Rodgers and having a big package ready to go. Would have looked exactly like this? I'm not sure. But clearly George Payton and John Schneider had gotten together at various points, whether it was at the Senior Bowl in Mobile and they crossed paths there, or whether it was in Indy at all last week. I didn't see them together, but odds are they're not going to just talk in public, but can find a private room somewhere or a place to grab coffee and just chat about the potential for a deal, without knowing what Rodgers' future was going to be. And it was all on Rodgers. George Payton had to have a backup plan, but I do think that had Rodgers been available, he was certainly a lot of people's preference in the building. Although I talked to some people with the Broncos prior to this, and even going back over the last month, that when you asked them what they want to do at quarterback, they would have said Rodgers, or rather they would have said Russell Wilson. And even yesterday when Rodgers made his announcement at 9:25 Mountain Time via Pat McAfee, and then Ian Rappaport had some details a minute later, I sent a text to that same, or to one person in particular I talked to a lot, and that person said, well, I guess it's now Russ or I don't know what, not knowing that they almost certainly knew more than I did as far as the framework of a deal perhaps being in place. But the way it was presented was, yeah, I guess it's Russ or I don't know. And to me, I'm like, well, is he going to be available? Clearly he was.
So there was no universe where Drew Lock was going to be the quarterback for the Broncos
I
heading
guess
into
not.
training camp.
I guess not. I was saying that if I were going to bet money, that's who I would bet on. I didn't feel great about it. I wasn't like, oh, he is the plan. It was Russ stays in Seattle. Deshaun Watson's not a factor, or goes somewhere else via trade. Rodgers stays in Green Bay, obviously. Maybe you trade for a Jimmy G. Maybe you just sign a Marcus Mariota, but Drew Lock potentially beats him out. Or you draft one of these young guys that I didn't get the sense they loved, and this is before Indy and then after Indy, where I know they talked to all of them, talking with some folks. It didn't seem like at 9 they wanted to go with one of these rookies. So it's going to be someone else, and there was a shot where they were just going to let Drew Lock roll with it and put all their eggs into the 2023 draft, or maybe trying to pry Russ away in a year. So at the same time, clearly these were their plans, 1A and 1B, and obviously you can decide how you want to rank them. I'm sure when we ask George Payton, he'll likely say Russ was plan A all along and that they never really had discussions with Green Bay, because the way it was being told to all of us is that Green Bay's not taking any calls. Or that they haven't. I think Brian Gutekunst said, I haven't received any calls. Well, when you give a call, check your extended car warranty, you weren't in a hurry to take that call. If you would know ahead of time that this is about to be a spam call and you're just getting taken for a ride, that you weren't going to answer it. But it doesn't mean someone wasn't making that call. So right. I think that was a little semantics on his part. But they can probably now, the other side of it, say we never really talked to Green Bay and feel comfortable saying that because it's probably true.
So we talked about Drew Lock here. He gets sent up to Seattle. What's their plan at quarterback? Because I can't imagine that a franchise like Seattle, even though they've had a kind of a bad run here with personnel, I don't think they saw enough out of Drew Lock in Denver to think, okay, this is our guy of the future here. This was the win of the package that we got back. Obviously, the good stuff they're getting back here are the first rounders, right? Drew Lock's almost sort of a fill-in. So are they going to be the leader in the clubhouse for Jimmy G? Like you mentioned, Deshaun Watson, who the heck knows what's going on there? What does Seattle look like under center next year?
Well, at the very least, they probably need to call on Carson Wentz, because it does seem like the Colts are open to trading Carson. And then you look at not only that, Jimmy G, I mentioned Mariota. Is Baker Mayfield perhaps available? I think you have to, just like the Broncos approach, according to George Payton, was to leave no stone unturned. If I'm John Schneider, unless I love one of these guys and know that at 9, I'm maybe even going to trade up a spot or two to have a shot to go get Malik Willis and build around him, or Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral or whomever it may be. So that could be their plan A, that it's going to be Drew Lock and Geno Smith, or maybe just Drew Lock and then a rookie here in year 1 on AR after Russ, if you will. But beyond that, they cut Bobby Wagner too. And so they're clearly going young, but they're not trading Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. They're not completely ripping it down to the studs. They've got players on both sides of the ball that they like, obviously. Talking to folks in Seattle, and I've certainly had conversations going both ways. Obviously, people asking about what the Broncos are doing, also asking about Noah Fant and my podcast partner, Shelby Harris, as well. But they are focused on the draft picks and the QBs. Is there a chance Drew Lock gets developed there? He may have a chance to play more, and in a new setting with a different team around him and a different play caller that isn't Pat Shurmur, who's had the last 2 years. There's a chance that he excels, but I do not think their plan is to just roll with Drew Lock and hope for the best. Just seconds ago, I saw a tweet, by the way. This is via Josina Anderson talking to Von Miller. Von says, I want to figure it out with the Rams first and foremost. They've been real good to me. On the slim chance that can't happen, I'll explore my options. Well, so then the question is, does he really want to come to Denver? Was he drumming up a market? Did Russ call him to ask about Denver? Just, hey, what's life like in Denver? I think that's possible. I heard a former player say through the grapevine, Russell Wilson reached out to a former teammate of theirs. And while I don't know exactly who that was, is that former teammate perhaps a guy that wore number 18 and came here at the end of his career? Very, very possible based on who this person was that said it. And so did Vaughn get that sense? And that's why he just wanted to get excited. I think he's also being politically correct. He still wants to market, right? The Rams can't afford to pay top dollar. The Broncos can afford to pay more, but what is top dollar for the Broncos with Vaughn 32, 33 years old now? Do they want to pay him north of $15 million or pay what J.J. Watt got with Arizona? I think it'll be interesting to see what that deal shapes up like. Maybe it has a lot of incentives in it. Hey, you make the Pro Bowl, you make All Pro, we go to the playoffs, we win playoff games, we win Super Bowls, where it has $500,000, $1 million on each of those things. You lead the league in sacks. You get 10 plus sacks. So the deal, it looks more team friendly on paper. And then if you're hitting all those marks, you don't mind paying those bonuses.
You're very, very true on that, BK. And as we transition to our next guest, George Sedano here, I'll ask you this on the back end.
How about George calling games? George calling games the other day. I was proud of him. I owe George a big thanks, Tom, because I know we're transitioning. There's George in his car. Nice of him to
look at that.
Pull over to the side of the road to talk with you, Tom. I owe George a big debt of gratitude. Anybody that watches the NFL's top 10 shows that are playing perpetuity, if you don't like seeing my mug up there, it's George's fault. We were at the Super Bowl in Dallas over a decade ago, and he came up to me and he says, hey, BK, the NFL Network folks may reach out to you because they were asking for somebody in Denver that wanted to talk. And fast forward to every year at the Super Bowl or the Combine, I'd bring my sport coat, I'd bring a tie, and I'd say, hey, are you ready for me to talk top 10? I wasn't as big time as like our pal Damon Amendola, who gets driven down to the studios there at NFL Films. But it's all George Sedano's fault, and I owe him a big thanks. It was cool to see George calling the game the other day.
Thanks, brother. Good to see you. Good to see you both. Yeah, listen, hey, man, those things run. It's funny. I still get text messages from people who are like, yo, how long ago did you do this? I'm like, that's easily 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, they stopped doing them, which is a bummer because I like doing them. But they definitely, after old Super Bowls and even close games, they're a very constant filler, even more so, I think, than a football life. Tommy, I'm going to get rolling. You got anything else for me? As much as I'd love to.
I was just going to ask you
George about the Lakers.
Oh, I'm definitely about to do that with George. I was going to just ask you quickly what you thought about Jokic, and are you going to lay down a little cash on him to win MVP? He's having another incredible season.
Yeah, where are the odds right now? And I'm sure George can speak to this better in terms of what it'll take for him to get there. But I did text Kenny Smith about this and actually Charles Barkley shouted me and Vic Lombardi out a couple of weeks ago on TNT about both of us giving him a hard time about Joker. But the lack of respect does feel like it's present. Maybe it's from people like Nick Wright who make it a bigger deal about how bad Jokic is when you see what he's doing night in, night out. So maybe I will lay some cash if I'm still getting friendly odds, but there's a chance that the folks in Vegas and whether that's SI Sportsbook or anywhere else have an idea that Joker for MVP is probably still a good bet, especially when Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. are on their way back here shorter in a short time, hopefully by the end of March for them. And they can maybe jump a couple notches up to, fourth place. I don't know about third unless Memphis really falls off, but then they'll be a top 4 seed. It'd be hard to overlook what Joker's done.
He's at plus 150 right now if you want to go throw a little cash.
All right. I might throw 20
plus
bucks
odds
while I'm making the Broncos plus 1,200 bet to win the Super Bowl. All right.
There you go.
George needs to get going clearly as he's talking to you from his car. So great talking to you, buddy. George, good seeing you. And
good to see you, Brandon.
Hopefully we'll cross paths soon.
Thanks,
yes,
BK.
Sir,
George, you're in Miami. Big game tonight. How excited are you for this one? Heat Suns. Dive into the matchup a little bit here. 2 top teams in their respective conferences going head to head here. What are your thoughts heading into the game? Are we going to see Booker tonight?
I don't know yet. We're still waiting to see if that's the case. We know he's on the trip, which is not what was expected initially. Initially, he wasn't going to travel, but he is on this particular trip, and I think that gives you at least a chance, right, to maybe see him tonight, which we'd like to see these 2 teams as close to full strength as possible. Obviously, we won't with Chris Paul's injury, but look, this Phoenix team, even without those 2 guys, has been really, really good. They almost pulled off a pretty big upset in Milwaukee on Sunday afternoon up there in Milwaukee we saw on ABC. So I hope we see Devin because I want to see the best game possible. But you're looking at 2 of the most complete teams in the NBA, Tommy.
Yeah, you're looking at Heat at 5.5 point favorites heading into this one at the moment, without us knowing if Booker is going to be involved. Talking about the Heat, a team you covered for a long time, a team you still enjoy from afar. Oladipo getting back into the mix here after being out with an injury for an extended period of time. We loved watching him ascend with the Pacers a few years ago, but it just hasn't been able to be consistent with him on the court over the last few years. But now getting back in the mix with a Miami team who has a 3-game lead in the Eastern Conference over the Sixers. How do you think adding a guy like Oladipo into the mix with that Heat rotation is going to help them or change how this team looks over the next coming months here as they make a playoff run?
Tom, if he can be any semblance of the player that he was prior to the injury in 2019, then the Heat have a steal. You're talking about a guy who's on a minimum contract of $2 million and change, and a guy who was a 2-time All-Star prior to this and still very young. And it bodes well at the moment because he talked about this recently, how after that 2019 surgery, which clearly did not go well and was not performed properly in his mind, he talked about how it felt like I was stepping on knives every time that I took a step on that knee. And after this surgery, I feel completely pain-free, and I feel as free as I've been in a really long time. So I think that's huge for them. And it's funny, the Heat and Eric Spoelstra actually have just kind of a wealth of depth at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to see how many of those guys who have helped them, the Gabe Vincents of the world, the Max Struses of the world, the Caleb Martins of the world, get their minutes cut, or maybe minutes cut entirely. But you come to Miami and you kind of know that sacrifice is kind of part of the mantra. And when you're looking at those guys that I just mentioned, those 3 guys, you're talking about guys who were two-way players at one point, who are getting an opportunity to play big-time basketball for the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So I'm sure there's some level of disappointment, but I'm sure there is a level of understanding as well that they knew what they were signing up for to play for this particular team. And they've probably gotten more run than they would have gotten anywhere else and happened to be doing it for a winner. So it's an interesting opportunity for the players involved. But I think if Oladipo is any semblance of what he was, as I mentioned earlier, he is a absolute part of this rotation. The amount of minutes, I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see.
So the team you cover now on a daily basis out in LA, the Lakers, man. Oh my God. It has been a downward spiral here since really 2022 got underway. The Anthony Davis injury didn't help. I was looking this up because I was like, man, it feels like the Lakers just haven't won consistently in like 5 years, right? But obviously that's not the case. They won the championship. But, just talking about how since the year started, it feels like it's been forever since this Lakers team was even a team that you would think has a chance to win the championship. They've only won 7 of their last 24 games, dating back to the stretch where they won, I think, 5 of 6 to close out last year and to open up this calendar year. It's been bad, man. What's going on here? I know they got the big win on Saturday. They lost again on Monday. They got the Rockets tonight. They're at plus 550 to win the finals and plus 3,000 to win the conference. So are they going to turn this thing around, George? Is it as simple as AD coming back? No, it's just too much of a train wreck.
No, it's too much at this point. And yes, look, if AD's healthy, are they a team that you want to see if you're Phoenix or Golden State or one of those teams? No, you don't want to see them in the first round. In theory, in the first round, you want someone you can kind of, challenge, who will challenge you a little bit, but you'll be able to get through fairly easily. That's not an easy series, but the Lakers aren't built to win against those type of teams. Maybe against Golden State, only because if Draymond is not healthy, right? Like, I think that is a huge factor in this as well, as far as predicting their success. But if they were to face Phoenix in the first round, which seems likely if they get out of the play-in, I just don't like their chances. Phoenix is a legit team, as we just talked about, and they're good even without their stars. So the Lakers, they just don't have the right roster mix. I said this at the beginning of the season, very early on, about 8 games into the season. I said, this thing isn't going to work as currently constituted. Russ doesn't fit with LeBron on offense. Defensively, they're not very good. And they've just got a lot of specialists on this team. They don't have enough two-way guys around LeBron and AD. So it's just a mismatched roster. And really, that's the biggest issue on this team. It's just the roster doesn't fit properly.
And LeBron, still playing well because he's LeBron, right? He's averaging 31, 9, and 5 over his last 10. But like I mentioned, they've only won 7 of their last 24, lost 5 of their last 6 coming out of the Saturday win. Look, man, I saw the story, I think it was maybe last week, or it was around the All-Star break, where LeBron was talking about wanting to play with his son, and that was going to be his plan after the Laker deal is done, and there's going to be that weird gap year. Whatever the case may be, it just feels to me, as a fan of the league and having followed LeBron his whole career, that it's time for him to kind of move on from this Lakers situation, and it feels like he's almost ready to do it a little too soon, right? His next plan is to play with his son, but he has to wait for that to be able to happen, right? So the next few years, it feels like could be really weird for LeBron in LA. Like, what are we looking at here over the next 1, 2, 3 years here with LeBron's career? I just feel like weird stuff could be happening. Like, are we going to see like a prolonged stretch where he's gone for a while and does other stuff? Is he going to get traded? Is he going to demand a trade? Like, what's going on here with LeBron as it relates to the Lakers?
I don't think he's leaving LA. Like, I think they're just going to have to mortgage their future. They can trade in the offseason. They can trade multiple first-round picks from way down the road. We're talking like 2027, 2029 to make moves, right? And try to attract a disgruntled star and get off of Russell Westbrook and try to create a better fit around those guys. I think that's their only move. LeBron's not leaving LA. Maybe in that weird, strange outlier scenario, we're talking, I don't know, Bronny is a junior in high school. He's going to have to play in college for a year. I think he may have to play more than a year. I think he's going to be a good college player, but I think he may have to play 2 years if I had to guess. So now we're talking 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So if in that scenario, Bronny gets drafted by someone, does LeBron want to play with him? Sure. And he already said money's not an issue. So yeah, I could see him doing one more extension with the Lakers. He's done a short-term extension with them recently. I think it was 2 years in addition to the year he had. I could see that being the case one more time. And then leaving his options open for a Bronny James potential sophomore leaving college situation. But yeah, he's not leaving the Lakers. Like that's not happening.
I think it was Cousin Sal tweeted, he quote tweeted that story from a few weeks ago and said, I hope LeBron likes Greece.
Yeah, look, I think it's really hard to judge a 17-year-old kid. I'll say
right.
This, I did Bronny's game, his game against St. Vincent St. Mary, which is LeBron's old school at Staples Center this year. I called that game, and I've seen Bronny play every year in some way, shape, or form. I've driven to Sierra Canyon to watch him play, and he has grown leaps and bounds from sophomore to junior year. He looks stronger. He's built like a college player now. He's got muscle tone to him. He doesn't look like a child anymore. He can shoot, I think, better than LeBron at that stage of his life. But he's smaller. He's like 6'2". He's not LeBron. He's not this massive player / Adonis, right, who looked like a man at that age. And he plays defense really well. He's really good moving the ball on offense. He took a bunch of charges in that game. He's going to be a pretty good player. Like, he's a top 50 kid in his class, top 40 kid in his class, in that range somewhere, 40 to 50. So he's going to be a good college player. And, he probably has, I'm guessing, another leap in him. How big that leap is will determine whether he plays in the NBA or not.
One more for you on the way out here, George. Clippers, you're kind of flying under the radar here. They've been dealing with injuries, yet they're still staying afloat. If the play-in started today, we'd have Lakers-Clippers going head-to-head. So what's the vibe around the Clippers right now? I feel like they got to be feeling pretty good about their position given the injury situation they've been in and where they're sitting at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Ty Lue's done a magnificent job. I think Ty Lue should get more pub for Coach of the Year, considering all the stuff he's had to deal with this year. They've done a really good job implementing players who are young guys who are not supposed to be playing this year at all. They've done a great job in player development. And Ty Lue, has basically told me they're barely scratching the surface on what their playbook should be anyway, because of so many young guys on this particular roster that are having to play bigger roles. Amir Coffey, Brandon Boston, Terrence Mann, who's now been there for a little bit. They still haven't been able to kind of really put out what they'd like to from a playbook perspective. So I think that once those guys come back, I think the Clippers next year are a good bet potentially to win a championship. I don't know what their odds would be. I don't know if you can place odds on next year at this point, but I would certainly consider it heavily because I think that they're capable of winning a championship and perhaps even being one of the favorites, if not the favorite next year, if Kawhi and PG come back healthy. Because even Norman Powell, who's in this mix, is like the perfect third player to play with those type of guys. And he hasn't played very much this year either. He got hurt very quickly after the trade from Portland.
You can listen to George Sedano every day on the radio in Los Angeles. You can watch him on ESPN's NBA coverage. You can watch him tonight on that Heat Suns game. Go check that out. Follow my man Sedano at Sedano on Twitter. George, thank you for the time. Go get ready for tonight's game, and we will hopefully have you back on here soon with your old buddy Kevin Rodgers. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
You got it, Tommy. Take care.
There you go, George Sedano. On the road, pulling over, joining the show today. So big thanks to BK out in Denver, who covers the Broncos for KOA. Had some great insight there from him on Russell Wilson. George, obviously, is fantastic on the NBA. He's a must-follow if you love the NBA. And this week on Great Dane Nation, episode coming out later today, Tony Boselli, the only Jacksonville Jaguar to ever make the Pro Football Hall of Fame, first one ever, getting in this year, joins us today on Great Dane Nation. So tune in for that podcast. Check us out, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out right here on YouTube. You can go and watch the entire interview between Morton Anderson and Tony Boselli. So that's going to do it for today's Daily Insider. I'm Tommy Freeze Pops, and Kevin Rodgers will hopefully be back with you tomorrow. Feeling under the weather today, so get well soon, Kevin, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Good luck with your bets.